This is called a minor kindness. His mother had never loved him, except perhaps in the end when a mother's hatefulness can soften into something a lot like love. When he was a child, she once looked at his face and touched his cheek, then burst into laughter at how ugly he was, how ugly a thing she had made. At 13, when he started to sweat and sprout hairs under his arms and between his legs, she was repulsed by his musk and dragged him to the porch to yell at him in front of their company. Their dark eyes had stung him, had shown him that his body was a shameful thing, and that what came out of it should be feared, reviled, and washed away. In those days, he rubbed and rubbed until there was nothing but raw chapping under his arms and a hot sting between his thighs. As a boy, he often prayed that she would die in her sleep, but when she died in his mid-20s, he felt both free and fearful. For so long, he had wanted only to not become her, and had emerged from the hunger and desperation of his childhood clean and handsome, but also with a special talent for cruelty, which he inflicted on his friends, especially those dearest and closest to him. He excavated their flaws with a meticulous hand and turned banal observations into cutting remarks that left his relationships strained and quivering. For all of his efforts to avoid becoming his mother, he had become a version of her, though it was a version that might have loved him. A therapist once suggested that he learn to love her for the person she was, and he had laughed. Who could love such a wretched, hurtful person? What of her was there to love? Minor kindnesses, a few meager gestures. A child's love is starving and voracious. It cannot survive on a few kind words every couple of years, nor can it withstand a constant assault, as in the way she struck him, hard and often, and because she could. In one of their final conversations, he struggled to ask her how long she had left to live. His voice failed him. He heard her breathing catch in a wheezing silence that had stretched across hundreds of miles of woodland and rivers and mountains, absorbing everything to reach him. What he wanted to ask was, "What will you do with this time?" What he wanted to ask was, "Do you love me?" Instead, he coughed and laughed, and she laughed, and then they were on to discuss the weather. She said to him that it was hard to talk, that it was hard to breathe, and he understood what she meant, that it was hard to live this way. What he wanted to say, but could not say, was that he forgave her for all she had done, that he could see her now as she was, and didn't find her quite so terrible, not so bad a mother. He had loved her, after all. Perhaps not tenderly, perhaps not wonderfully, but he had loved her. In his own way, a reflection of the way she taught him to love, not on the surface where it can be cleared away by time or circumstances. Rather, his mother had taught him to love where it's messy and cramped and ugly, full of pain and suffering, a sustaining love. And what else could he really ask of his mother? What else can you really ask of a woman who herself had been given no space into which she could expand and live on her own terms? Her love grew out of her personal limitations, and in the end, her death taught him to accept that this too could be love, that this too could be a real, true love, and how pure, in the end, that love had been.
Yeah.